Hi, I'm John DeDakis. I'm a manuscript editor, a writing coach, a novelist, and a former editor on CNN's The Situation Room with Wolf Blitzer. You're one to one with me, and I'm one to one with Noor Tagouri. There she is. Full disclosure, Noor is one of my former journalism students when I taught at the University of Maryland. That I'm trying to think, you must have graduated about 8 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that.
10 years ago.
10 years
2020
ago.
2014. Yeah, it feels like yesterday.
Well, it does, and I'm pretty sure you got an A in the class, and you've definitely got an A for the life that you've been living
Thank you.
ever since. And we're going to talk about what you've been up to. But what I want to do is I want to start with what I remember. There was a piece that you did for class on
Nice.
the mosque in
Yep.
Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and you went there, and of course the community was up in arms. This is a Christian nation, and we shouldn't have these things. And Islam is it's a political philosophy. It's not a religion. Talk about what it was like to go into that, I don't know, for lack of a better word, snake pit.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, thanks for that question, John. I remember that. I feel like I wouldn't call it trouble to class, but I was traveling a lot at the time during like as a speaker, and so all of my assignments I ended up doing in the cities that I was speaking in. And so I was speaking in at Vanderbilt University, and I had this assignment, and I was following this story about a Muslim cemetery in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And I was there during like the hearing for it. It was incredibly divisive. The main argument was about how in the Muslim tradition, the way we bury the dead is very minimal and simple and natural, which is like in a shroud and a very minimal cardboard, like wooden box, which is actually way better for the environment than embalming and all of the chemicals that we put into the ground. But nevertheless, that was the argument, was like, we're gonna poison our waters if we bury this way, the way that we've been burying for thousands of years. And so I went to cover that story, was incredibly harassed by the opposition. I was there covering the story objective, like just, doing the regular news package, but was incredibly harassed. I remember the woman yelling at, there's like a woman who was yelling at me, didn't believe that it was a school assignment, and thought I was like trying to get her actually killed. Like that was how intense her fear was. It was so interesting. All these years later, just looking back at it, you can laugh about how afraid people were. And it was literally it was me who was covering her hair at the time wearing hijab, and then another reporter who was black. We were both incredibly harassed. We were like the only people who like kind of looked that way and were reporting on the story. Um,
Well, and
and
I mean, I remember being very concerned for your safety, and
I remember
basically,
that too. And I remember because I'll never forget, on the last day of class, you told me, "Are you sure you want to do this? It only takes one crazy person to, And I never forgot that. And I just remember thinking like, yeah, I think I would die for this. Like this is all I've ever wanted to do, and it's so important to me. Like just telling the truth in general is so important. And I think like looking back, I remember there was this moment where they started yelling at me and telling me to turn my camera off, and I did because I was so afraid. And then I remembered a mentor of mine who was also a professor at UMD and worked at WSA 9, like his words in my head echoed like, never turn the camera off
never
no matter
turn the
what,
camera
never
off.
turn the
No
camera
way.
off.
Right.
Yeah, and then it was like 15 seconds where I was afraid, and I was like, "Wait a minute. This is why they say these things. This is why we learn this way." Um and yeah, and so it's really, this story has come up in my life more recently for a different reason, in that I've become really good friends with this man named John Christian, who runs a natural burial ground in Tennessee just outside of Nashville. And it's incredibly celebrated. His land is very protected. And I was like, like there was a Muslim cemetery back in the day that was trying to just, they bury similarly to how you bury, except his is actually even more, like just straight into the ground. And he was telling me how if only a tiny fraction of people chose the route of natural burial versus like the embalming and the works, we would be able to bring down the temperature of our planet. Like it's that important for the earth. And it's just so interesting how fear tends to dominate so much of like how people move and react, because it's all reaction. Like obviously the people who were yelling and going, it was really, it's sad and disturbing because their fear is real because their bodies are reacting to it, but they don't like finish the sentence. They don't see what's like right in front of their faces. It's a fear that really exists, in their mind and in their body. And when you don't like confront that fear, you end up making yourself miserable. Like, yeah, they may have like called me names and put me down but at least I knew who I was, and it didn't really feel like they did. So that story really stayed with me.
One of the things that you did is a TED Talk. And one of the things you talk about in that TED Talk is identity. And
Yeah.
I want to roll a clip from it, just the first 2 minutes or so, because
Okay.
you just to give people a sense of how you set it up and to see how poised you are in front of a group. So this,
And because I haven't watched this in like
yeah, this
maybe however many years.
exactly. So, so this will be very intimidating, but you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. So here we go. I'm going to share the screen, and I got it. This is a low budget operation, Noor.
This is great.
Well, so here it is.
Oh, I'm nervous. Wow.
My name is Noor Tagouri, and on most occasions, I'm used to being the elephant in the room. An Arab woman who is a hijabi, who wants to be a news anchor talk show host, who probably has enough scars to keep you warm for 17 Arctic winters. But today, I am honored to be in a room filled with people who believe in unleashing the rebellious spirit within each of us.
I think I'll stop there just so that I just wanted to give people a taste of it. And let me go back to you now. Hold on. I'll probably put us off the air if I'm not careful. How did you go about getting that TED Talk?
Hmm. Well, the team reached out to me. It was like a really good conference. That was really hard to watch for some reason. Wow.
Why?
Um,
Why was that hard to watch?
I just haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in so long, and it's actually been on my um I like have made the intention to rewatch it for a while. And cuz it's like feels like lifetimes ago, like it was an a version of me that was so optimistic and so light and like really believed in everything she was saying, but also in people and in like the future and in the direction the world was going. And yeah,
I'm sensing that you're a little broken up.
yeah. I mean, who isn't right now? Um,
Can you put into words why you feel the way you do? I'm sorry to put you on the spot like this, but
no, that's your job. That's what I would do. um, Probably because if I were to watch the rest of that talk, there are messages in it that I could use right now.
what do you mean?
And
What do you mean?
well, the talk itself is called Calling Upon the 10,000. It's inspired by Maya Angelou's quote of, I stand as one, but I come as 10,000. And just this notion that, like, even though we are individual, independent people, we are like one person here right now in this like human form. The stories that we carry, the legacies that we carry, the weight that we carry is of so many that have come before us. It's for so many that come after us. And I think that it's so beautiful to like watch that version of myself who's so like happy to be there because I really I was, and I loved what I did, and I loved speaking, and I loved telling stories, and I still love all of those things. And also, that platform really broke me down. Um, like the pressure that was put on me as someone who was really young and felt the weight of like representing my people perfectly,
Mm.
even though we're not a monolith, um, trying
I'm
to prove something, you know, like
yeah.
instead of being able to I didn't feel like I really had the opportunity to go on my own journey and question everything I believed in and question everything, like all of the things I was talking so strongly about identity and I felt so strongly about my identity, and but I never actually questioned it. And it's because I never had the opportunity or the space to, because when you grow up as a Muslim in America, your identity is so politicized that like your relationship with it is often rooted in survival.
I'm hearing, and I'll say it, and you tell me if my impression is accurate. I'm sensing that the you of 8 to 10 years ago, when that TED talk happened, you had a lot of, I don't know, idealism and optimism, and that was then. And you are in the spotlight. You are, in a sense, an ambassador for Islam. The world is incredibly polarized. The United States is incredibly polarized. Are you finding that it is harder to be optimistic?
I've actually been thinking a lot about optimism in general. I think we need, I think I shouldn't say we, I need optimism in order to keep putting one foot in front of the other. It's it's hope that I'm really contending with. Optimism allows me to see the good and the positive in whatever the experience is happening right now is. I think hope, I'm having a little bit more of an interesting I'm starting to question that concept a lot more because hope focuses a lot on the future and we just don't know the future, and so and hoping for a very specific future maybe is also very limiting because we just don't know what it is and it distracts us from being present. I think also my relationship with faith and spirituality and identity has been um has really turned me inside out. My last investigation rep really started with that question of how is the way that Muslims and Arabs have been represented in Western media impacted American culture and society as a whole.
Mhm.
And I had to the I had to ask myself also what role did I play in all of that? And what role did I play in that in my own life? And I do not consider myself an ambassador for
Mhm.
anything or anyone except for myself. I do not
Uh-huh.
represent anything except for myself in this moment. And I think that that is uh, that's how I see the world and people now. I don't think anyone represents anything other than themselves because I know how,
Mhm.
uh, what a burden that is
It's a
when that
burden. I was going to
happens.
say that same thing. I have on the screen how you can be contacted at your website. I want to make sure it's accurate.
It is
AYS
accurate.
dot media, right? It's not
Yes.
dot com. And
Yep.
AYS means at your service, which is the consulting firm that you've founded. You're an entrepreneur. And I want to play another clip because we're talking about identity. You're talking about being a Muslim woman. And this is a piece that you did again a while ago, and this is more of a reminder of the Noor I remember, back when you were one of the students. So here it is. I'm going to share the screen and hit
This
play.
might surprise some people, but a lot of Muslims only do this because we choose to, not because we're forced to. It's called the hijab, and in some places it's pretty controversial. France has a partial ban on the hijab, while Germany's chancellor wants to do something similar with the niqab, which is a full face veil. The arguments against them go something like this.
She ought to be in prison for wearing a hijab. This immigration policy of us assimilating immigrants into our culture isn't really working.
Their worth is explicitly diminished, and this is an outward sign of that captivity.
But that leaves out some crucial context and history about women who cover, including early followers of Christ, like Mary, the mother of Jesus. You never see her depicted without a hijab. Today we see a lot of people across many religions wearing some kind of head covering, including nuns, some Jewish women, and some Muslim women. So why is it supposedly so scary when Muslim women do it? Partly because of misinformation and over-the-top depictions, especially in TV and movies. The truth is, people all over the world cover for a lot of reasons. To maintain a sense of modesty, to empower themselves, to honor tradition, or just because they think it's the right thing to do. And let's be clear, in some places, women are forced to cover their head or face. But that might have more to do with politics or culture than with religion. After all, the Quran says there is no compulsion in Islam. For a lot of us, it's just a way to express ourselves. And in societies that value free expression, that's something to consider.
Very good. That's an A. But my question now,
I was impressed with that story.
yeah. So my question then is, how do you feel looking back at it now? Because identity is, identity evolves.
Yeah, no, it really does. I mean, I'm really impressed with that. It's such a trip to watch old stories. So thank you for that. I especially today, thank you. One thing that I always think about is how my belief around identity, even though maybe I have more language or I've expanded my perspective, it's always been pretty consistent, which is that at the end of the day, it's rooted in choice and protecting protecting the opportunity for people to go on the journey of self-discovery themselves. Like I remember when I was in Paris and I was on like a really big talk show there, and I was the first like woman who was covering her hair who was on that show. It was really controversial that they were having me on. I didn't even realize it because I was so young and naive until afterwards. But on the show specifically, like the hosts are like challenging me and bullying me about the hijab, and I literally said, I don't care if someone leaves their house completely naked or completely covered. I do not believe that a government should ever tell someone how to dress. Period. Like full stop. Nothing more, nothing less. And that is my deepest belief. Is I personally am not like offended by how people choose to cover their bodies or not cover their bodies. I think that self-expression is incredibly important. Like our bodies are a storytelling medium themselves. And so my belief, to be honest, since that video has actually become a lot more clear. Like I agree with everything that I was saying. I think it was incredibly clear for me personally. Like I'm also a journalist and I ask questions. And so like I am on my own journey of stepping outside of any identity that I label, that I had put onto myself, and distancing myself so that I can look at who I am outside of that. Because I think that labels oftentimes are abstractions to the essence of who we really are.
Is that why you're choosing not to wear a hijab right now?
Yeah, that is why I'm choosing not to. I mean, in very simple terms, at the end of the day, it's just like it's my journey, and I never, I turned 30 last year. I started covering my hair when I was 15. And so half of my life, my entire adulthood, I didn't know who I was outside of that. And I needed space to be able to figure that out.
Within evangelicalism, there are now some books. There's Sarah McCammon, who is an NPR political correspondent. She has a book coming out really in just a few weeks called The Ex-Vangelicals. And she was raised in the evangelical church and began to have second thoughts about it. So my question to you, and we have not, gone over questions or anything, but, my question is, are you now, I don't know, reassessing your faith or working how you're going to work it through? How would
Mm,
you articulate where you are now spiritually?
yeah. I think for the most part, I'm actually choosing not to answer that as much because I'm like still really in my own journey right now. And also part of me, like I didn't put out a statement about my hair and I haven't spoken publicly about it at all because I feel like I've always been I've always felt the pressure to speak on behalf of the choices I make with my body. And for the first time I wanted to honor that and honor that journey. I think my relationship with faith and spirituality has also always been really consistent. I am obsessed with learning about belief systems and why people believe the things that they believe. And I have always collected beliefs and learnings from different traditions. So for me, I yeah, I just I'm continuing to ask questions and to go on that journey and I don't know, it just feels really clear and as simple as that without having to be like, and yes, this is who I am, this is what I believe, and these are the labels I want you to apply to me. I'm just like, it really is no one's business. I sometimes choose to share the questions I ask out loud, and sometimes I don't. And my mission is always to like really protect my own space and other people's space so that they have the opportunity to go on that journey because until you are able to ask yourself the hard questions about all of the beliefs that you carry, not just the ones that are faith related, that is the only way that you will for sure like have agency over your choice of what you believe and how you practice and what you do.
My goodness. And such an interesting conversation and so many different directions we can go with it. Because what's happening is that, from such a young age, you've had this desire to express yourself, to be, not only creative, but, a bridge builder, a communicator. I mean, that's in essence who you are, a communicator. And you're very articulate and you're in a fishbowl. I mean, you've got probably 500,000 followers on social media. And some of the clips that I played, hundreds of thousands of people have seen that. And so that puts you in a precarious position to a certain extent. You've put yourself in a precarious position because, on the one hand, you at one point were, whether you uh, would consider yourself an ambassador now, you really were an ambassador, like it or not. And that
Yeah.
then means that it puts you in a position to have to reassess things in public, which is a tremendously delicate balancing act. And it takes, I think, tremendous courage to do that, but it's got to be draining and maybe scary.
Yeah. Thank you for acknowledging that. I mean, the draining is, yeah, it's it is an intense life path, period. Like this journey that I've been on since I was really young has been incredibly intense. I feel very guided on it and I feel protected and supported with my inner circle, with my relationship to the divine, with my partner, with my friends. Like, so I am actually incredibly I just feel so lucky. Like I feel like as painful it's painful. I mean, this is painful. I am going through a lot internally, especially the last couple of years. And also, I often think I would never trade any of this for anything because I really feel like this is the only you have to go through these experiences in order to really figure out who you are and what you believe. Like otherwise, we're picking up beliefs from our parents or our friends or our communities or our society, and we're looking at Twitter to see like what people have said and commented about this one thing so that we can repeat these like talking points. And like I don't feel like people are really sitting with like things outside of consuming anything and just being like, what do I believe about this? What do
Mhm.
I know about this?
Mhm.
And I believe that that's why we're here. I've always like I feel strongly about I am alive to ask questions and to figure out who I am. Like just the concept of this I am, like who that actually is.
And one of the things that I think is a constant is that curiosity,
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be it's certainly part of my identity, I guess you could say, that curiosity, that desire to really understand what makes the other person tick. And there
Yeah.
are so many other people that you can find that out about, which makes life tremendously interesting. And of course, the more you know about other people, the more that's going to influence you. So help me understand what you've been doing. Let's just say the last year. You founded At Your Service, AYS. You have a podcast.
Yeah.
You are a storyteller.
Yeah.
So given that your personal life is still in flux, isn't it true for all of us? you know at rock bottom, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you're
Yeah.
doing on any given day?
I mean, it is eerie that we're having this conversation today just because like the last 5 days have been, I've basically found myself put in a situation where I'm just like, I might have to just leave the country for a few months and just like figure things out because it's getting a lot. But I think that for me, with At Your Service is a storytelling company, and I really feel like we've created this community of uh, telling stories for the storyteller as well. And so we tell stories through, we have our podcast, the investigative series Rep, we have our interview series, which is Podcast Noor. And then we also produce documentaries. We're working on a new show right now, and we're working on we do like these dinner series. So I really care a lot about bringing people in person together. We have an upcoming book club. We have a lot of At Your Service community clubs. So I'll do different, um, whether it's book clubs, or I did a rep club, which was like a 10-week intensive where I taught the investigation, the podcast, while each of the attendees also went on their own individual journeys, or what I call the quest of a question. And I'm working on writing a book,
Good.
which I'm really excited about. It is not memoir, which is what I was waiting to get to. I mean, of course, there will be like memoir-esque stories. I feel like I was always pressured to write a book about my life, and I was like, but I'm a child. I'm so young.
Well,
But
you
now
can
I'm
write
like,
more, but memoir, you don't have to write just one, because
I
memoirs
know.
are thematic.
That's true, and I definitely could, and also I'm just telling myself that. I mean, I'm really, really looking forward to this book. It's really important. I wrote this children's book that I'm working on, and then I actually have a novel. Okay, there's just a lot of writing, just a lot of storytelling. Yeah, this is what we do. I say we tell our focus is story first, medium second. So instead of, in journalism, I've done everything: newspaper, radio, local TV, digital, documentary, podcast. But I don't think that every story fits into just any medium.
Right.
So that's why we started At Your Service. It was like we found ourselves with all of these different tentacles of like, well, this story needs to be told this way, this story needs to be told this way. And then we also help brands and companies better tell their stories with more of a sense of journalistic integrity and just good storytelling. So I find myself just, yeah. But if on a personal, how am I spending my days? This morning I woke up and we have like a beautiful swimming quarry in our yard, and we jump in every morning, and
Where are you, by the way?
I am in the Catskill Mountains,
Okay.
upstate New York. Yeah. So I live a mountain life. I jump into this freezing water, and then I go into my cabin and I paint, and I paint as a way of me to like processing questions and stories I'm working on. And then I write, and I mostly write on a legal pad. I don't even like write. I don't even do it on a laptop anymore.
Wow. Well, and that, I think, if you're like me, when you're writing longhand, it slows things down. You
Exactly, exactly. And it also it makes the channel more clear. I've realized that like, I don't know, there's something about a legal pad and pen and paper and like sometimes taking up space because the story feels bigger, and then bringing it down, and I just it's the best way for me.
One thing I want you to set this up. I want to play a short clip from the very first podcast that you did, Vanished. And this is really
Whoa.
what prompted us to have this
Yeah.
conversation, because
Yeah.
in 1986, and I'll do my best to set it up, and then you can fact check me. In 1986, I was a White House correspondent, and Ronald Reagan was president, and Muammar Gaddafi was the dictator of Libya, basically, and he had taunted the U.S. by basically declaring sovereignty over the entire Gulf of Sidra, which is the equivalent of like the Gulf of Mexico, basically saying, if you cross the line of death and come into the Gulf of Sidra, we're going to shoot you down. And so, in fact, I remember asking Reagan a question during a White House press conference before the U.S. actually acted, because, Gaddafi was itching for a fight. And it actually happened eventually in, I think, April of 1986. There had been a bombing at a discotheque in Berlin where American servicemen had been. I think some people were killed. And so that was the pretext for being able to go after Gaddafi. And there was they bombed. I think they tried to take him out and ended up killing he I think moved around a lot, wasn't there. His infant daughter was killed. But what brings us to you and this particular podcast is that the U.S. said that they were trying to limit collateral damage. Well, there's always collateral damage, and the collateral damage happened to be your mother's family, your uncles. And I mean, this was before you were born, but it certainly affected her because she was a school kid in the United States. So the clip I want to play, it's just a short minute or two, is you interviewing your uncle, I believe, who was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or in Oklahoma. And so, they're finding out in real time that members of their family have been wiped out. I mean, so wiped out that there was really nothing even to pick up. So is there anything else you want to add before I roll the clip?
No, that was great. Thank you.
Okay, so no fact checking here, right? So
No, you
far?
did great.
Okay, thank you. Anyway, let me go to the videotape, this low budget operation that we have here, and we'll
Your
listen.
operation is solid.
Well, thank you,
Very
ma'am.
solid.
All
Yeah.
right, here we go.
You were just telling us like you had the choice between Australia and Tulsa, Oklahoma, and you went with Tulsa. Why did you want to come? What were you leaving?
Well, I was leaving Gaddafi's regime, and at the beginning, his first few years, everybody thought he's young and he is very down to earth and he wants to rule Libya with the people of Libya. But then, as years goes on, we discovered that he was just a tyrant creeping.
And what did you see in America that you felt like would be a better place for you?
I came to the United States because of the Constitution of the United States. I went to school in 1966 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I felt the warmth of the people of Oklahoma and democracy in this country and the good people.
Fabulous. And what really got my attention, Noor, is that, the United States right now is on the cusp of an election, and it's really a choice between democracy and authoritarianism. And the thing that impressed me there was the attractiveness of the United States in comparison to the dictatorship. Basically, it was an Islamic dictatorship. And, there were executions for people who didn't agree with Gaddafi. So does it seem spooky to you that we are in a similar situation where we really could start heading in a direction like that? Is that one of the reasons you're so, I don't know, agitated right now emotionally?
Huh. Well, one thing I will say, it was definitely a violent dictatorship, but it wasn't an Islamic one. Gaddafi was not, he did not care for religion at all. In fact, my dad had like his friends or fellow students who were hung in the public town square because they attended prayers. So it was which just adds to the levels and layers of the identity trauma of like how people, like lean more into religion or abandon it based on what the political situation of where they live are and what it actually represents. But I think my feelings, it's hard because, yeah, democracy versus authoritarianism, but also, John, like in my world, you know, people are really do not feel even the concept of democracy anymore. Like people don't feel represented, especially right now when we are funding a genocide and
You're talking
people
about
don't
the Israel
of
Gaza
of
thing.
in Gaza. We're literally funding the bombing of children and then also sending very minimal food for starvation. Like it feels broken. It feels like the democracy doesn't exist, and it feels like there is no choice. Like what actually is the choice that's going to protect the interest of the people? I don't know. And it
Mhm.
also is it for me, for our generation, I think it's challenging because my parents came here as immigrants, and for a lot of first gen kids, it's like they fled a specific kind of dictatorship and are just trying to hold on to like what matters. But I'm seeing the turning, especially with even my own parents, where we're just like, what is this country doing? Like, what are we doing? Not only to people abroad, but to our own people. Like, if I'm just being honest right now, my hardship for the last 5 days has been that um, we like missed paperwork in the mail that came to us during the floods that happened in Libya that killed several of our family members. So it was a very chaotic time. And then because of that missed paperwork, suddenly like our registration is suspended and we don't have
Mhm.
insurance and all of this stuff with our car. And now we can't drive our car for 4 months. And I literally live in the mountains. And I went from like I'm going from place to place to place to place to place to place trying to like find some mercy or compassion, being like I'm just trying to keep it together. Like, I actually
Mhm.
need a car to survive. Like, this is a really hard time, whatever. And it just like in the limbo of the DMV and New York City parking and all of those things that literally feels like hell on earth sometimes.
Mhm.
I just was like, we are the systems that we're living in are setting us up to fail. Like they're setting us up to constantly be in survival mode where we don't have the capacity to care beyond like the next meal or the next
Mhm.
bill or the next whatever. And it's so I appreciate the conversations about like this upcoming election of democracy versus authoritarianism. And I also empathize with like people's complete like just um pain and desperation of just like how does any of this like what matters anymore? I don't feel like we have any power. And I know that right now, maybe in this moment today when I'm feeling really down, like that's what is coming through. But the grief that I was feeling even just in the last several days is like, yeah, thank God I have a support system. I have a friend who's letting me borrow a car like for a little bit until we figure it out, whatever. But what about the people who can't? Like, what about most people who literally don't have that social safety net? And while we might not have to, think about whether or not we can cover our hair or leave the house and do whatever and like specific freedoms, which are incredibly beautiful. The idea of the American dream that I hear in my uncle's voice when he says I came here for the Constitution, like doesn't feel
Mhm.
like it's ringing true.
Mhm. Um, there's a lot there that I want to talk about. Let's go back to the whole Israeli Gaza thing. Um, and of course, we're not going to be able to solve the problem in this conversation. And but I want to at least bring up a couple of things that others might be asking who are listening to this. Um, I mean, my dad was in World War II. his unit liberated one of the concentration camps. There were 5,000 dead Jews in this courtyard when he arrived. And, Israel, Hamas has basically, their purpose is to eliminate Israel. That's their code. And so I'm not defending Israel by any means, because the overkill is, I think, pretty obvious of what's going on. But I guess my question is, are you finding that because you're a bridge builder, and are you able to speak your truth to Islamic extremists? Because, terrorism, 9/11, it was conducted by people who probably hijacked not only airplanes, but Islam. But they were certainly rabid in their beliefs. So are you finding that you're able to speak to both sides? Are you able to do that? I'm not sure I'm asking the question as
Yeah,
well
I
as
don't
it
know. I
could be.
mean, it's not about asking both sides anything. Like, this is the thing about that conversation, is it just goes to that place where, for me, the conversation like starts and ends with like, we shouldn't be starving people and murdering people and occupying people and oppressing people, period. Like, that's it. Like, I care about the humans and all of this, the politics of it all. Like, it is all just disgusting all around. But I'm on a very human personal level, like the fact that people are afraid to say children should not die, or that we shouldn't be starving people, is really, really, really terrifying. I feel like this is a moral stain on our consciousness, and that it is really hard to expect Americans to enthusiastically want to vote for a president who's funding it. Like, that's it. That's all that it is. That's all. I'm an American, so that's like where my
But
mind
what's
is
the
at.
alternative? What's the alternative?
The alternative is a ceasefire and stop killing people, and diplomatic negotiations, and just stop killing people. Like, I don't
Okay,
think killing people gets us anywhere, especially when you're like talking about extremists who are whatever. The people who make up that entity are former orphans whose families were like obliterated. No, I find it very hard to believe that anybody thinks that this is actually going to solve the
But
problem of
but,
terrorism.
but my question, follow up, ma'am, if you don't mind, Madam
Yeah,
President, is that if you don't vote for the current administration, what ends up happening is that
100%.
Trump gets
No, no, no.
elected.
This is the problem. This is
Mhm.
why people are so messed up right now, because
Yeah.
it's just like, why does it have to, at this point, this is a war on our consciousness. Like,
Yeah.
that is what's happening. And so when every single person is asking, like, who is feeling really big feelings about this, is literally asking themselves, what role am I playing in this? And then they're like, okay, do I have it in my conscience to vote for someone who's killing? I mean, I have multiple friends. I have a friend who just lost 128 of his family members in one airstrike.
Oh man.
128 of his family members. Another friend who's trying to evacuate her entire family. One of them is a cousin who's 22 years old. Her husband, they've been married for 2 months. Her husband and his entire family were just killed in an airstrike, and then she found out she was pregnant.
Mm.
She's 22. And this is very common, but it's just constantly like X amount of hundreds of family members have died, and this how many. And by the way, like, this happened 1 month after the floods in Libya happened, where we lost several family members, and we were still like, there is so much grief to go around, that I think that, but like, it is really hard. I don't know with about voting in November. I'm literally taking it one day at a time, because I'm just like, my body is freaking out. My consciousness is freaking out. Like, like, what is our moral responsibility? I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I do, and I know that the Trump presidency would be so much worse. Of course it would be. Like, it's not going to be any better. And also, why does it have to be like the worst of the worst of the worst, or like the worst?
Right. That's
It's
what's,
so
yeah.
wild.
And so what it sounds like is that you are, I don't know, making it up as you go. You're trying to figure this out on a moment
But
by
I
moment
also think
basis. Go
that
ahead.
this is what this experience since the floods, actually, when you're like overwhelmed with grief that is unfathomable. What the experience has taught me is that the only thing that matters is right now, this present moment, and that I cannot make a decision for the future because I don't know who I am in the future, and I don't know if I make it to the future, and I don't know what happens in the future. And even in my own transition with like covering my hair, the day that I chose not, my entire process for that was every morning I'm going to wake up and make that decision for that day. And then maybe one day it'll change, and maybe one day it won't. But at least I'm taking back that agency of being present in the moment. And that's what this feels like, because otherwise, if you ask people to like know what they're going to do in the future, when every single moment this entire experience is changing so drastically, we're keeping people in this state of constant distress and despair about something that they cannot control. The election isn't today. We have every single day leading up to it to like pay attention, to listen, to meditate, to sit with what these decisions feel like in our bodies. I'm so tired of like this transactional just doing the right thing without actually like feeling what is the right thing for me in this moment. There are going to be some people who have the ability in their consciousness to vote for the president that might be a more safer option than the other one, and that is a responsibility that they'll carry on. But I don't think that it should be on the consciousness of like my friend who lost 128 family members in a massacre that was sponsored by our country to feel the pressure. I would never tell that you still have to vote for Biden. What
Mhm.
that is literal. That's cruel, a cruelty on a different level. Everyone has a different role to play in this moment. And I think for me, I'm navigating what that role looks like every single day.
What kind of advice do you have for young women who are 15 now when you were, starting your enthusiastic journey? Uh, that's you're 15 years out from there. What kind of advice do you have for someone who says, I want to be like you?
I mean, my immediate response is be no, like the best way you can be like me is by being like you,
There you
because
go.
like there's only one you, there's only one me. Like, I think that there's this level of pressure today for people to become carbon copies of one another, and we're losing that sense of individuality. Like, at the very least, I do often think about, as messed up as this country can be in its policies and its politics, at least I have the ability to really like, and the space to try to figure out who I am every single day. And so, and I guess that advice, if we were going to globalize that advice of what you would tell that person, it really is just like, don't be afraid to ask the hard questions out loud as soon as they enter your mind. We don't need to let them fester and consume you, because they are always there. And also, when you ask the hard questions out loud, you do not need to ask them with the intention of a perioded answer. Sometimes the power isn't simply asking, because once you ask the question, you create the space of possibility and positive synchronicity to fall into place. And I guess that's a really good way to like go back to what we were originally talking about optimism, which is like, the optimism is this. The optimism exists in the fact that like, I do everything that I can every single day to create space in my life to welcome positive synchronicity, and to trust that even if the direction I'm being pulled in physically feels like unbearable, at least I'm moving. At least it's not stagnant, because if it was stagnant and I was stuck in the loop, then you create your own like hell. And by moving, by just putting one foot in front of the other, you're constantly taking steps, not just toward possibility, but in possibility. And maybe in possibility is more important than toward possibility, because at least you know you're here right now.
Oof. And interestingly, Noor means light. So,
Mm.
so you've just enlightened, you've certainly enlightened me. People can get in touch with you through ays.media. Anything else you want to add?
I'm so happy to, our relationship it started off in a really funny, interesting way. And it's always a story I love to go back to.
That's right.
And
You shadowed me at CNN.
yes, but if you remember correctly, I begged you to let me shadow you at CNN. And I
Yeah.
kept asking you, and you were like, I was emailing you,
Who
and you were
is
like,
this? Who is this person?
yeah, you were like, you can just email me the questions. And then I
Because
emailed you the questions.
this was before I was your professor.
Yes, yes.
Because I didn't teach at UMD
Yeah.
until after I left CNN.
Yep, and then you finally, and I remember, I was so strategic about how I emailed you the questions, because you said you can email me questions, but I don't have time, so I probably won't even answer them. That's literally what you
Oh,
said.
did I do
And
that?
I was
Shame on me.
No, it was good. You exercised my muscle, like of strategically thinking, because then I emailed you the questions, but in every question, I literally made them like paragraphs where I was talking about myself, so that you could at least get an idea. I remember one of the questions was something about like, I wrote a novel when I was 16, and blah blah blah. And I didn't realize at the time that you were also writing novels.
Right.
And whatever. Each question was like very intricate. And then you were like, I didn't realize your questions were going to be so in depth. Why don't you come in? And I was like,
Right.
yes! It was amazing.
Oh,
But yeah.
I was played by a master here. What
Well,
was
look
it?
at the full circle moment.
Well, so what was it like, being in the CNN newsroom as we were, doing what we did?
I mean, it was great. I think that
This was the Situation Room. You met
it was a
Wolf.
situation room. I met Wolf. Yeah, it was. I mean, that was my first time doing that, and it was yeah, it was very potent. I remember more so the dinner that we had, where I got to ask you questions, than even just the Situation Room. The Situation Room was great, especially first experience. And then I've been on CNN since, so I've been able to like be in the same place and be like, wow, I remember how I started. But then I remember when I walked into the class and I saw you as the professor, and I freaked out. So like I was like I was like, what? Like, am I seeing things? It was so interesting. And then I believe your co there was another professor in that
Yeah,
class, right?
Chris Schliemann.
And he volunteers at the Radio and Television Museum, right?
Well,
You know that?
he's a photographer and kept winning the White House Correspondents Association Photographer of the Year award. So, I mean, that's the great thing about University of Maryland, because most of the teachers were working journalists.
Yeah, which I love.
We didn't
It
get a
was
lot of benefits, but you had like hundreds of years of experience that were
yeah.
in the classroom there.
Yeah. I mean, yes, and also our class was definitely my favorite. I
Oh,
barely
it's too
remember
late
my
now. It's
other
not going to
class.
make any difference. You don't
Well,
have
that's
to.
how you know it's true.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
thank you then.
No, thank you.
I mean, you've come such a long way, and you're a delight. And
Thank you.
I think one of the reasons that you are delightful is that you really do wear your heart on your sleeve. And that's so important in this society, because we wear masks, and
But
we
that's
in
exhausting.
it is.
Not even in an altruistic. I do that because the alternative, it makes me tired, and I don't want to be tired.
Yeah, and and we anesthetize the pain instead of moving toward it. And that's, I
Yes.
think, what is the essence of good journalism. It's also the essence of good novel writing, is you're tapping into the pain and you're
Yes.
articulating it, and you're trying to find meaning. That's
Yeah.
what life is all about, I think, is trying to find meaning. No
Is
matter.
it trying to find meaning, or is it having a wide enough perspective to give meaning to the life that you have, like in a way that's fulfilling. Because I've been thinking about this thing with meaning and just how like maybe meaning isn't out there. Maybe everything is meaningless and you give meaning to it. I can take what happened to me the last week. I can take that as a sign that I need to like leave the country for a little bit because like clearly if my means of transportation is being taken, I could do that. Or I could go against, instead of moving through the pain, I could try to resist everything and try to figure it out, which just like isn't working. So I
Seems
think
like
it's
it's
about
two
finding
sides.
me.
It seems like it's two sides of the same coin, because finding meaning and living in a meaningful way. I think one begets the other. It's a chicken egg situation.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm asking questions. That's what I'm question I'm
Yeah,
asking myself
you're
about
almost
meaning.
turning this interview around. I'm not supposed to let that happen.
Oh,
Well, listen, we could go on and on. This is how people can contact you, AYS Media. This has gone even better than I expected, and I already knew it was going to be wonderful. We've been one-to-one with Noor Tagouri. She's a journalist and a storyteller, among many other things. I'm John DeDakis. You're one-to-one with me. That's my website, johndedakis.com. Noor, thank you so much for being on One to One.
thank you so much for having me. At your service.